when Gutenberg invented the printing press, because no longer were books controlled by the church.
Mm.
Um,
That was a problem
for the church
Okay.
and the kings and queens of Europe, because suddenly the merchant class and the general population are able to read and learn.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's extensive amounts of knowledge that's hidden in the written word,
Mm-hmm.
and when it's easily distributed, it's a problem for those that have been in power.
Yeah.
So we're
So you were connecting that to it being an issue. Are you saying like mass media or Hollywood? It's a problem that everyone has access to the tools for them.
it may not be a frenetic problem. They're not running around with their hair on fire, pulling it out.
But they can't gatekeep it anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
But you're also seeing box office sales are down.
Yeah.
At the movie theater.
Yeah.
And some of it may be the actual content they're putting out, but I wouldn't say the movies that are being made today are any worse than they were 20, 30, 40 years ago.
I would argue that. I think movies, and I could just be stuck in my childhood, like the movies that came out when I was younger. I could just be more fond of them because I saw them when I was a child. But I feel like movies when I were younger, before everyone had access to all the tools like they do now, were a lot better. And I feel like our attention spans were longer. And I feel like a lot of people microwave content, microwave movies. Like Netflix is just crapping out content constantly, thinking about sales rather than just making a really good movie.
There is some validity to that view, I don't discount it at all.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that it's the full scope.
Yeah.
Because first of all, you don't have access to what common plebes, if you will, were thinking 50 years ago, because they did not have the tools to distribute it widely.
Mm-hmm.
They could write it down or they could type it. And I mean, people were making crappy zines ages ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like if they had a mimeograph machine, which that you take your typed paper and it's basically a big carbon copier of what you've typed, and you got to run it by hand to print it out. And that's how people disseminated their memes then. They made flyers and bumper stickers.
Memes before memes?
Yeah. I mean, I
wonder what they call them then.
Memes is actually a term that's been around for over a century. It's part of epistemology, which is the philosophy behind knowing what we know and how we know it.
So it's kind of like psychology almost, epistemology. It's like understanding your brain.
Well, it's like, how do you know what the color blue is?
Yeah.
Like, that's the kind of question that epistemology...
I was taught in school that blue is blue.
Right.
And then it's like, where does blue come from? Who started that? That's what epistemology is?
Yes. Yes. It's those kind of questions that are behind the questions of just what your brain does.
Okay.
It's some deep stuff, but it's not. Shit. It's not the big questions like, why am I here? Like,
Existential questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And existentialism is an entire another branch of philosophy under metaphysics.
Interesting.
So I don't know that it's an apple to oranges or apple to apple comparison between what we have available to us today
Yeah.
as to, because it's group dynamics still.
Yeah.
Within every group of people, there's always the dumbest person in the room, and there's always the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter which group of people we're talking about. There's 50 NASA scientists in a room.
Mm-hmm.
One of them's the smartest one there.
Yeah.
And
So
one of them,
maybe back then, as we were saying, they would gatekeep the tools, right? Or like what was released to the public, like Hollywood. Now it's like more available for us. Like I can just create a whole mixtape from my living room. Back in the the 90s, it was hard for me to create a mixtape. I had to know someone, go to a studio. They had the tapes like you were telling me about. It was a lot harder. It wasn't as readily available. The same thing is movie editing, things of that nature. Like, I know people that shoot film, like they shoot short films constantly all the time and they look like a Hollywood movie.
yeah,
But they do that like on Normandy Boulevard, bro, like, right up the street.
right. And so to your question, is Hollywood concerned about it? Actually, yeah. I remember in the 90s working on film sets in New York, and digital cameras were coming out. Digital cameras were coming out that were shooting good, because digital cameras had been out since the early 80s or before.
Yeah.
And you had to, they were like $3,000, and you had this big suitcase for a battery and a tape player to record from the cameras then. But then they shrunk down in the 90s to about the size of what's a prosumer level.
Like a camcorder, yeah.
Yeah. And you put a tape in there and you put the battery in there and you could go shoot, and they began to make it so you could change the lenses and make different lens selections, which is what happens in a high-end film. Is the director of photography is making choices about which lens to shoot for the depth of field, so that they're looking at this part of your face and the back of your head is starting to fade out a little bit because they're artsy. Yeah. Like it's we're all creative people, all of us.
Yeah.
And so they began talking I remember here in camera department being really like, like I can hang with some nerds.
Yeah.
I can hang with some nerdy people that are talking about some nerdy stuff, and but camera department as a whole. You ever talk to two car guys that are like, one's a Ford guy, one's a Chevy guy.
Yeah.
And they start the numbers.
And you start to be like, I don't know what these people are talking about.
Right. They start throwing these numbers at each other back and forth, and they know what they're talking about. They both, with the 34.
They're nerds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're car nerds.
Yeah.
But they're,
yeah.
Like, because it's manly.
You could be, nerd is just obsessing over something.
Right.
Yeah.
So camera nerds have an extensive numbers conversation. Yeah. That makes the only people I've ever seen with a more extensive numbers conversation are literal rocket scientists.
Yeah. Elon Musk.
He's not a nerd.
He's a nerd.
No, he's not a nerd. He's a financer. He comes in and finances
nerds.
Well, actually, nerds that have already solved their problem.
Yeah.
And the only thing they have left is, how do I get more money for solving my problem?
Yeah.
That's what he does. He doesn't know anything about computer code. He doesn't know anything about cars. He doesn't know anything about space.
I feel you on that. I don't know enough about him for me to give a direct opinion on him, but I have listened to like him on a few podcasts, and I think he's very entertaining to listen to. I think he's cool. He does seem like a smart guy to me, but I'm not the brightest dude in the world, so.
There's a kind of intelligence that is required in order to speak to the public
Yeah.
about something that's highly technical.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean they necessarily understand the highly technical stuff the same way.
I think Einstein said, if you can't say it simply, you don't understand it.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he goes in, he buys the rocket company that's inventing a new rocket.
SpaceX.
Yes. He goes in and buys that, rebrands it, and then begins sitting there talking to the people who designed this equipment and talks to them long enough. And he's quick enough to be able to respond back and to take from that conversation the important stuff and explain it to someone else why they should care.
Yeah.
And that's a different kind of intelligence than the creative engineering intelligence that designs the car.
The people that work for him have.
Yes.
Yeah. He's a really interesting guy, and it's also interesting with the chips, the brain chips. I can't remember what they're called. You know what I'm talking about?
I have been hearing about brain chips in some form or another for the last 40 years.
But have you actually seen them now? The real ones? Yeah, I can't remember what they're called. This isn't a conspiracy. It sounds like a conspiracy, but this is like 100% fact. He owns them. I can't remember the name of them. I wish we were on Joe Rogan's podcast and I could be like, Jamie, look this up. Look up those chips that's in your brain. But yeah, he put it in monkeys, and they work. They've been proven to work in monkeys. And what they did was they would feed them smoothies while they're playing like a game that's very similar to like one of those old like Galaga or Pac-Man or something like that. And they have them with a mouse, and it's very simple for them to play. And I think it's even just a bunch of circles, and you put the mouse over the color that is directing the monkey to go to. So it'll be like, click on red to get smoothie, and there'll be a bunch of blue dots, and then there's a red dot, and then it'll go over the red and click, and then it can release smoothie into a straw to the monkey, right? So and then it keeps doing that over and over and over, and then after a while, the game is actually unplugged. The mouse doesn't work anymore, and they're using the chip in their brain to control it. And that's like not conspiracy, that's real.
Well, I haven't heard about that particular story.
Yeah.
I've been hearing about the mark of the beast.
Yeah.
In various forms, and
isn't it crazy that it's actually happening now, though? Like the stuff that people used to craze about and think that it was all like some like prophesizing, like something that's gonna happen and it's gonna be the end of the world and it's the devil and all this stuff, but it's actually like real now.
I don't know if crazy is the word I would use. Expected.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still waiting on lightsabers.
Yeah. Oh, they have one of those, bro. They actually have one.
I want to go over to Walgreens and get a lightsaber.
Like yeah.
I mean,
they don't even make toy lightsabers anymore, bro. Don't start me on that, bro. I go to Walmart or Target. I look for a good lightsaber. They don't have any.
But the essence of why it's not crazy to me,
yeah,
is humans have ideas all the time, and as a creative, we're bored shitless population. We go, hey, that's a great idea, and everyone, some way, shape, or form, collectively works towards making it happen. So chips in the brain. There's
I think it's called like RFID chip or something. I can't remember.
RFID is how your phone pays for
That's not it.
your Cokes from the store.
Oh, like Apple Pay?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that it is an RFID chip maybe in your brain. Because I think it's meant to start off with simple things. Like, you know, we should pull that up actually.
I mean, that's the nature, I believe, of creative efforts is you start small, and then when that works, you continue building upon that.
Neuralink.
Neuralink.
Neuralink. That's what it's called. Neuralink. That's the company. So yeah, he does Neuralink, SpaceX, and Tesla. That's his 3 companies.
And Twitter,
And now he has Twitter. So 4.
which has turned into a cesspit of.
See, this is interesting too. Is I like that he bought Twitter because his premise is no censorship. No censorship. You can say anything; it all flies.
Well, I mean, that's an absolute, and it's the only absolute that
Only Sith deal in absolutes.
this is true. The only absolutes that humans can tolerate is the absolute that they can't tolerate absolutes.
Okay.
Like,
Do you like that or no?
do I like that?
Do you like that he wants a platform to be have no censorship?
Oh,
Or do you think it's all bullshit?
well, I'm like 10 years over Twitter. Like when brands came on and began to
Be a part of it.
be a part of it,
Yeah.
it was no longer the public square conversation that first adopter nerds were having.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've really paid attention to anything on Twitter since the Obama election.
Yeah. I feel you. Yeah.
At some point, it feels like work.
Yeah.
To
Keep up.
pay attention to at all, and for it to be of any actual value, you have to have some sort of fire hose that gets everything in, and then you filter it into bits of information that pertain to your objectives and goals. I don't have the time to work on filtering out the fire hose. And I mean, just keeping track of high school people on Facebook is laborious.
Yeah.
On some days. And that's kind of fun because, I've got people that are doing stuff and their kids are doing stuff.
It's people that you know.
Yeah.
So what you're telling me is you don't really care about anything past like you. Like what you got going on and your connections in your life is more what you would like to exist in.
I can't neurologically extend beyond the circle of people I know.
Okay. Like it's not your concern. Like fuck what the world got going on. I'm here.
I've been attentive to the news.
Yeah.
Since I was small.
Mm-hmm.
So I give a shit about what's happening on the planet. There's degrees that I progress through. Sometimes I'm a little more interested in what's happening in faraway places and than others. And not because there's a war that our troops are involved in. And then there are times when my capacity, my bandwidth is taken up by other things, and I can't. And I don't know that that's any different than the next human being in the line. When the scope of an individual's problems is large enough that they can't see past them, they're the problems that are occurring around the world don't touch them. And the diverse channels of information flow we have are exactly that. Additional channels. It's a lot of effort.
Yeah, to keep up.
And if you're looking at this one and 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 this one,
can drain you.
Exactly. Yeah. And then you've got no time
for yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
And it takes effort to do something creative. And if you're expending all your energy, throwing it all out there, paying attention to 27 different information streams.
I love that word. That phrase is paying attention. As you're paying attention. I was telling somebody earlier that literally everything is time and energy. When you make money, you make it from time and energy. People literally get paid hourly. And even if you just get a salary, you're using your time and your energy to create money, to create conscious thought. For me to sit here with you, that's like, this is time and energy. Same thing when I make food. And then when I eat it, that's energy and time. It took me 5 minutes to make and eat this sandwich, or 10 minutes or whatever.
And it's an energy expenditure income equation that is primal. Predators that live in harsh environments are keenly aware if they don't have a large enough kill immediately, they're going to starve. Their cubs in the den are going to starve. Their whole pack is going to starve. But they can't waste their energy on
nonsense.
Right. And if the prey is too large, too healthy, too strong, it's a pass.
Yeah. It's like risk for reward. Like
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And there's a fine balance on how much reward you're looking for and how much risk you're willing to exert. And if you're laying everything on the line, and I don't mean like, metaphorically, like if you're literally like, this is it, this is the end, or we get to live another day, you're going to be making a different set of choices than if
it's not critical.
Right.
Yeah.
If you've got a full belly,
yeah,
you're not gonna go charging after.
Yeah, something that could harm you.
Exactly.
Yeah, but then someone that is poverty stricken might rob you compared to a rich guy. It's like, I'm not gonna go freaking rob anybody. Why would I do that?
Right. They've got other ways to rob you.
Yeah.
They call them banks.
Yeah. Legal extortion.
I don't know that I fully believe that, but there is, I once
fully believe in what?
I don't know that I fully believe that banks are criminal or taxes or robbery. I once asked the question, what happens if money disappears?
Yeah.
It's just
we would eventually create some sort of new currency. I think that's just how it works.
It's because if you're going to do anything more complex,
because it's hard to track time and energy. right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I worked time and energy. I have this amount of dollars. Here's all my time and energy through my dollars,
Right.
right? So when I'm going on this luxurious vacation that costs thousands and thousands of dollars, like I spent time and energy to earn that, right?
Well, how does that luxurious vacation even exist without a form of currency?
Yeah.
A complicated flow of currency around you.
Mm-hmm.
Because the luxury vacation isn't just you
Yeah.
going to the Caribbean.
Yeah. It's the whole employee staff and the
It's
big buildings and
and all
wherever you
those products you encounter along the way, all the towels and
the
the nice,
champagne and da da da.
and each of these things has a diverse set of tools and implements that are required in order to produce them. So that expands the web of complexity even further. And without money, you can't be the guy who builds the special tool that makes the bottles.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because what do you trade that for?
Mm-hmm.
What
Yeah.
do you trade that for to feed
Give
your
me a
children?
chicken for
Right.
this one bottle. It's like something weird.
And this guy doesn't make the bottle itself. He makes the one tool that makes the bottle.
Like the machine.
Right.
To blow the glass.
One tool in the machine.
Oh wow. Yeah. Dang. Yeah, that's deep, man.
And how does he trade this tool to someone who knits sweaters? What are they going to do with that tool?
Mm-hmm.
It's a special use tool.
Mm-hmm.
So luxury doesn't exist without a complex network of
System.
currencies, exchanges flowing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know that I fully believe the joke that banks are just the way rich people rob you.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of funny.
Now I do believe that power corrupts. I believe that even when we were in school, if you gave a kid like the power over anything, like maybe to choose a team or something, they're gonna always choose it in their absolute favor. Or maybe if they could choose a study partner, it's like power corrupts.
I don't know that making choices to further your own self-interest is necessarily corruption.
Survival of the fittest.
Right. Within the prisoner's dilemma, you're going to make the choice to save your own ass because you don't know what your partner who's in the other interrogation room is going to choose. You're going to make your own choice. So I think that, like in school, if someone is the hall monitor, they're going to make decisions in that role
that aren't fair.
That are fair from their perspective.
Mm-hmm. But sometimes they'll abuse it for no reason. They might be like, you know what, I don't like that kid. I'm gonna give him a demerit or whatever because I don't like him.
That I don't disagree. That does happen.
I don't like Jews, so I'm gonna treat them unfairly compared to this person.
And I think that power corrupts those who are already corrupted.
They have corrupt minds in general.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think when people are rich, a lot of times they're out of touch with the common folk. I think there's a saying like about being in touch with like the king being in touch with the common folk is like super important. I can't remember the saying, but a lot of people that are well off or very, very rich, they're out of touch with what everyone else is going through. So they're living this whole different life and they're worried about very different things than us. so they can kind of overlook or not give a fuck about your common problems and make decisions based on their problems.
Well, you're right in that I don't anticipate someone who actually has $1 billion to know how much bread cost.
Yeah, right. They don't
Um,
think about that.
because they pay somebody to.
To go get their bread.
I imagine,
Yeah,
like,
they don't go to the grocery store.
and the reason I imagine they pay somebody to stock the pantry and cook the food is because that's what I would do if I had $1 billion.
Yeah,
So
of
I'm
course.
probably corruptible.
Yeah, but is that necessarily that? I don't think that's corrupt, right? I think like having no like only giving a fuck about yourself and having a lot of power. You don't have to. This world is completely free. Like I like where your mind's at when you kind of like brought it to survival of the fittest type of mindset where it's like, hey, that's where they are. Like fuck it. They can do whatever they want. Because ultimately, in this reality, we can do whatever the fuck we want. There are no rules, right?
There,
And what I think might be morally wrong might not be morally wrong to you. And I have to accept that.
there's an awful lot that you just said in there that I think deserves to be unpacked.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know that there's objectively from 50,000 feet above our level right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that. I suppose there is. And I act as if I understand right and wrong
Yes.
to the best of my ability.
Yeah.
I don't know that the moral code of everyone is actually, I know that the moral code everyone has is not the same.
Mm-hmm.
And that's dependent upon the culture which they're raised in, the family which they're born in, more than their genetics.
Like go to Mexico, bro, and fuck around and find out. You know what I'm saying? Get your head chopped off, brother, over there.
And I would counter that it depends on where you go.
Yes.
And it depends on where you go in North America.
Yeah.
And
It's
fuck
a
around and find
generalization,
out.
of course.
Yeah.
And in America, you could run into a crazy motherfucker out here that'll gouge you, bro. You know, gouge your eyes out. Like it's
or you could run into someone who doesn't.
who's extremely passionate, the exact opposite of that.
Right.
You know, yeah. One of my favorite sayings that I like to keep with me is think of the most utterly beautiful thing you possibly could think of right now. Think of the most beautiful thing that you could think of. All right? Whatever that is. It could be a sunrise, it could be your mother, it could be whatever, right? Think of that. Try your best. And then just know the exact opposite exists. The exact opposite exists, and that's just life.
And it's not just the exact opposite. It's the whole gradient in between.
Yeah.
To the left, to the
These
right.
two extremes, and then everything in the middle.
Yeah. There's a vast spectrum. And I don't know that we know the full extent of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are nearly 8 billion people on this planet.
Yeah.
No one is going to have the time in their life to go speak 2 words to every single one of them.
Yeah. No. Yeah, no.
To speak 2 words in the general vicinity of 1% of 1% of that population is extraordinarily rare.
Yeah. What's interesting is now with technology, we can get a pretty good percent. You know what I'm saying? Like the media, the news. I think it's like 1% though. I don't think it's.
You know, you would be lucky to get 1% of 1%.
I think 1%. I may be incorrect. I think it's like 1 to 10% of the world is on the internet.
That's probably
Isn't that crazy?
a sound number.
1 to 10% of the world's on the internet. We think everyone in the world's on the internet. Like most people just assume that. You know, we're like, yeah, everybody's on Facebook. No, bro, like we're the minority. But so many people use it. That's still so many people. 1% of 8 billion, bro. Like we can't even like fathom these numbers in our head. Like we can't actually compartmentalize that shit, you know?
It's a reality problem. What sort of reality does 800,000 people scattered around the planet create?
Mm-hmm.
What sort of reality does 800,000 people within 100 miles of each other create?
Mm-hmm.
What sort of reality does 800,000 people within 10 miles of each other create?
Like in Jacksonville, I think we have 1 million people, right?
Right.
Like right at 1 million. That's that's a lot of freaking people right there. But it's actually not shit compared to the world, dude.
Yeah. It's
8 billion. That's a lot.
we're like a third tier
And how do we even
city.
get that number, you know?
8 billion?
Yeah, like I know that we do consensus of like every time we have a birth. Like we're very lucky and fortunate in America and in other, like UK or even China, whatever. Like we do have systems and
There's extensive systems, they're called governments,
governments
around the
that
world
keep track and record of
that
everything.
and this is why I don't believe
The number.
taxation is theft.
Mm. Because they understand how many people are actually here
And provide at least an organizing hub around which society forms.
yeah.
And the taxation is kind of like paying the cover charge to get into a club.
Mm.
Some places the club does better things with their money than other clubs do. But to get into the club, to be a part of the club, to be a member of, we receive benefits that are hard to see.
Yeah.
Because they're so part of our visual vocabulary for modern society. Oh yeah, you have to have asphalt covered roads.
Mm.
You have to have sidewalks on the side of the road. You have to have stoplights. No modern society can exist without those.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
The reflectors on the road and all these little things.
Right, they could.
Yeah.
They could. It would be a very different society. We didn't have asphalt covered roads 120 years ago.
That's how we got here.
Right.
Very interesting. Very interesting. In 2019, I went to Thailand, and that was really interesting to see like a third world country and to see how they get down over there compared to America.
Travel is the best education because it allows you to see, at the very least, it allows you to look at where you're from with a new set of eyes.
Mm. Yeah.
If only temporarily. Because once you're back, 6 months, you have lost the immediacy of those perspectives.
Yeah.
And they've been folded in.
Yeah.
Um,
People over there were very respectful compared to Americans. I was there for 30 days. When we were there, people don't think the way people think over here day to day. from just my little 30-day venture. Um, yeah, respect was a big thing. I don't know. Like their form of respect was just a lot different. I feel like over here, like people complain about like Starbucks or like they're in the line, like making a fuss about their Starbucks or something. And over there, if they had an issue with their order, it's not like "fuck you." It's like, "Hey, there's something wrong with this. You mind?" You know, from my experience, it just seemed like people were way, and even like the workers, everyone took more pride in everything they did there. Like, it's like a lot of mom and pop stores, and like they live in the businesses that they're working in. Like usually their house is right above their business. So you'd be eating somewhere and this is partly their home. And they take care of it a little different. And they just had a lot more like pride in a lot of the things they did. Mundane things, like yeah.
So to circle back to power and corruption,
Yeah.
within the fabric of society that has the core values of respect and self pride, there perhaps is less likelihood for the leaders of those societies to be corrupted.
They're corrupt too over there for sure. They're fucking way corrupt, dude.
Perhaps.
If you say fuck the king, you go to jail, bro. Freedom of speech is not a thing over there.
And and perhaps that politeness
comes from fear.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
We are
Blessed.
We're rude, we're brash,
Yeah.
and I'm speaking of we as Americans. Where we stand out wherever we go. People, when I was 16, I went to the Netherlands. Wherever I went for the entire summer that I was there, I was guaranteed to hear somebody around me say stupid Americans.
Yeah.
It was the first time I ever encountered it, and it took many years before I realized, one, they were talking about me, and two, I stood out that much, and they had seen other Americans enough.
The way you walk and talk or whatever.
And we all left a bad impression.
Yes.
So that by the time I went through the same rooms or pathways that these other Americans had, these people were perceived me in a general term.
Negative light.
Yep.
Yeah. When I was in Thailand, every time I'd meet someone from, let's say like the UK or just anywhere that's not Thailand, you tell them you're from America, it was like, it almost started getting embarrassing. Because it was like, I noticed that people were like, oh, like you're American? Like, oh, like they look at you kind of different. But most of them would just poke fun at you because you're American and you're this like super privileged, gun slinging, eagle on your shoulder, Bud Light in your hand, cowboy. That's how they picture us as like super Republican. They think all of us are like one way. Glutton with my like large fry and like huge ass Big Mac or whatever. And it almost got embarrassing to tell people I was from America,
From the outside, you couldn't walk down a street in Italy and tell which political end of the spectrum the Italians that were on.
Yeah.
They all are going to appear to be Italians to you. But the divide there is not just two ways. There's 4 or 5 major parties.
Interesting.
And there's antagonism from centuries between some of the parties. and they can recognize each other the same way we can recognize each other. We know when we walk into a room where we're the minority political view.
Mm-hmm.
It's obvious.
Yeah.
And when we walk into a room and like, oh, this is a mixed group, it's going to be lively.
I love walking into a room with a bunch of open-minded individuals, man. I love that. I think a lot of people that are one way or the other, like, tend to be a little closed-minded. And the thing is, like, I can, I think it's not sympathize, empathize. I can feel for
That's empathy.
empathy I have empathy for both sides because it's like, I can understand how both of you got to the same conclusion, but I just think life is a lot more complex than just one way or the other, you know? Like I find myself lying on both sides very often, and there's a lot of extremists, that are like one way or the other.
It's easy to identify with both sides when they're really close. When there's a great philosophical divide between their ideologies and the behaviors they're willing to participate in, then it's less easy to find the identification with both sides when they're so diametrically opposed. That being said, when you go to another society, you can't see those divides.
Yeah, you just see people.
Right. Because you're not invested in
Their democracy.
their particular sets of problems.
Yeah.
Even if you were monitoring an information stream about their particular set of problems, you're only given the information that they think to share.
Mm-hmm. You don't feel the pressure of what they're going through.
Exactly. You can never know another person completely.
Mm.
Even if there is a person on the planet that every thought they have in their head, they are capable of speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're, theoretically chained to that person for the duration of their life,
Mm-hmm.
so that you have to hear everything that comes out of their mouth, which is also every thought that's in their head.
Yeah.
You're still not going to know them because there are degrees of thought we all have which do not have a verbal expression.
Mm-hmm.
And
Feelings and whatnot.
yeah, there are complex concepts which it may take 10 years of talking in order to begin to describe the concept, which are at low levels in what it means to be conscious.
Mm-hmm. I like the word emotional intelligence a lot because I think that some people cannot explain their emotions well. And I think that's because they don't have a very great relationship with it. Or there are some things that are just maybe they're not that articulate in general, and it's very hard for them to explain what they feel. But for me personally, I think like accepting my emotions and not trying to drown them out with other things, alcohol or pornography or drugs or whatever, food even. Like there's so many things that we do constantly to like block out what we're feeling without really noticing that's why we're doing it. But I think to sit with yourself in solitude and really hone in on what you're feeling and try to articulate it to yourself and go like, what's wrong with me? What is this? I think that's emotional intelligence. I think that's how you gain it, at least. To like, oh, I know what I feel and how I feel.
And to be able to perceive that existence in someone else.
Yeah.
And to
they feel like this because of
to comprehend the uh, equation which produces the result that they are exhibiting. Um,
and that goes all the way back to what you said earlier, the pistol amity, whatever it was called.
Epistemology.
Epistemology, yeah.
What we know and how we know it.
Yeah. What we feel and why we feel it.
That's probably technically a different branch of philosophy.
But you can see
But I'm not going to rack my brain for that one at the moment. Particularly because the thread of what we're unraveling here seems to be not particularly in that field of philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I think a lot of us do not we don't self-reflect enough. I think a lot of people don't. And maybe it could be one thing or the other, whatever the reason is. I don't know if it's like because we're such busy people, today, or we have so many distractions, constant um, information being shot at us all the time, and social media or whatever. But I don't think a lot of people know themselves. I don't think a lot of people really know who they are. So, like you're saying that other people might not know you. I think most people don't even know themselves.
Well, that's another factor within how you or I can never completely know another person, because not only is it impossible to express all the thoughts inside their head, but not all the thoughts they have inside their head are their own. When you hear your mom's voice, that's because you grew up listening to your mom tell you things, and her voice
Is in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's part of the fabric from which you're woven, but you don't necessarily own it because it didn't originate with you. And to determine where you originate means separating all of those threads which weaves the fabric of this presentation that you have before me. So I can only know as much as you know. And you can only know as much as you know according to the time you spend unraveling the weavings.
Or as much as I choose to expose to you.
That's the other part of it. There's that risk reward equation. It doesn't just go for food.
Yeah. Socially.
It goes for social and the security we get from networks.
Dude, it preaches to the choir. Because I write a lot of music, dude. I write constantly, all the time. There's not a day that goes by that I do not work on music. Not gonna say I write every day, but I'm always working on music. But there are some songs that I write because I choose to freely write my music. I don't want to have any confines in it. I don't want to think about what political stance that I may be on when I'm writing this or whatever, right? I just want to write from my heart. And then when you finish the product and you listen back to it and you're like, oh, fuck, this is going to piss some people off. Some people are not going to like this. That's when you go, fuck, should I put this out? Or should I not? Right?
Right.
And that's kind of like what it's like not sharing a part of yourself to someone just in conversation or in passing or on a podcast. It's like because you have that fear of people not accepting what you're saying or not liking what you're saying, and that can be an outcast. Because as humans, we want to be accepted. We want community.
Oh, you're absolutely correct. And while I'm responding, raise the arm on that microphone
Oh,
a
yes,
little
sir.
bit. Yeah, it's not your fault. It
Right
needs,
here,
yeah,
just to tighten.
yeah, but it's really hard to tighten.
I got you. Is that good?
You might want to pop it up just a little bit further. There you go.
Let me see if I can. Sorry, podcast listeners, for those pops.
So,
all right,
I identify completely with what you just spoke about.
Yeah.
Which is probably why we're having this conversation.
Maybe so.
Because as you could guess, I'm working on music all the time.
Yeah.
Even when I'm not in the living room surrounded by all my gear.
Yeah.
When I'm driving in the car, most days I am playing the latest bounce in the listening room because the car system is the best system to check
this is
the
true.
mix. Naughty by Nature said it.
Yeah.
And everyone knows you got to follow Naughty by Nature.
You got to go in the car and listen, man. Straight
right. So if I'm driving somewhere, I'm probably listening to a bounce. If I'm not listening to a bounce, I'm listening to material, source.
Hello.
She has no shame, that cat. And if I'm making something,
Yeah,
I experience that both the letting go and just making it. Because for me, that's the important part.
That's art.
The moment where I lose frame of time and space.
Yeah. You're not thinking about politics anymore. You're not thinking about what your neighbor thinks. You're just creating.
I'm just one note after the next, one utterance after the next.
Being free.
And until it's exhausted, I'm outside the confines of space and time.
In another realm.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I live for.
Yeah.
Like that there.
Yeah.
That moment.
Such a beautiful thing.
To be able to approach that moment at all times. So that's what I thought of when you asked me to think of a beautiful thing.
Yes.
Was that moment where space and time does not exist.
Oh, wow. It's deep.
Because that's what I literally...
So would you consider that only then? Is it only when you're creating art, or is it when you're in the moment?
There are other instances.
Like if you're in nature and you're not thinking about what's going on back home, you're just taking breaths and one foot after the other. You're looking at the trees and the sun coming through the trees. You're not thinking, you're in the moment. Is that consider that or no? For you?
That's not necessarily the scenario that would get me there, but yes, there are other situations which get me into that outside of time and space.
Okay. Interesting.
For instance, if I'm at height, say I'm standing on a 10-inch wide beam 100 feet off the ground.
Like you do at the stadium, yeah?
Yes.
Yep.
If I'm at height, I am in now.
Interesting. So you like that feeling. That's incredible to you.
Well, I had to work to be able to overcome the physiological responses to being at height. But once I was able to do that, I was able to experience now.
Yeah. Okay.
In the same way creation works. Like if I'm painting.
It also puts you in the now.
It puts me in the now. Or if...
Have you read... My apologies, go ahead.
Or if I'm on a bike riding inside of traffic.
Yeah. Put you in that moment.
Right.
Have you read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle? Or heard of it?
I have heard of it. And if I say I've read it, it didn't make that big of an impact on me because I forgot that I had read it.
Yeah.
And if I say I didn't read it, then please explain
What
it
do you
to
mean,
me.
bro? It's right there in your books. Yeah, but in all these books, I see it right there now. But great book, and it's basically just about being in the present moment and how powerful it is. And it's like we're constantly stuck in our thoughts, and we're constantly thinking about the next moment or the past moment, and we're very rarely in the present as a species. A lot of us are just constantly future, past, future, past, future, past thoughts. I'm hungry, this, that, third, blah, blah, blah. But it's like when you're just completely present and you're thoughtless, it's bliss.
I don't know if I've read that particular work.
Mm-hmm.
There are,
But he obviously didn't invent that, right? It's like
right.
it's been
There's
around.
numerous other works that
Alan
I
Watts.
have read that have explored that concept.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things about that is in the last 15 years, scientists have been studying the physiology of the brain
Mm-hmm.
and the matter which makes up your brain has a latency so that it requires extraordinary moments in order for you to. So you remember the other day when we were in here recording?
Yes.
And I had too many sins going to other channels, and
Yes.
what you said would come back through the headphones.
There's a latency. Yeah.
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 There'd be a lag.
Yeah.
So what we know is now
Yes.
actually occurred 15 nanoseconds ago.
Mm.
What our senses perceive as now, and I don't know if that 15 nanoseconds is the number,
Yeah.
but there was a finite number that scientists who've been studying this for a while came up with.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only an extremely
Small number.
It's a really small number, and we live with it.
Yeah.
So we're not going to notice it. But when we're in a state of heightened awareness, such as if I take 6 inches this way, I could fall and die. Or I'm looking for the next perfect note.
Yeah.
Or the next best note.
Mm-hmm.
Or
if you're taking some mushrooms.
That was never my experience with those. And it may be because of the wiring of my brain, but they just gave me bad eyesight.
Interesting.
You
might have had the wrong ones, bro. You might have got them from the wrong.
They're not supposed to make you go to the bathroom for hours, are they?
But yeah, so I practice every single day. I try to live in that moment as much as possible, not only because I just want to live in bliss, like, and this and that. Like, no, I think thinking is obviously very important, right? I'm not like, you should always just never think, no thoughts ever, just present. But I think when you are present, you're operating from your subconscious and you're operating from your intuitive nature. So whenever I'm present, there's more going on than I realize that help me operate and help me speak and help me, do things. Like I think when I'm operating from the moment, in the moment, rather than thinking too much, it's I make better choices and better decisions in general.
I tend to agree with that.
Yeah.
The nagging problem I have with the now is it's hard to maintain.
Yeah.
I want to be in it, and sometimes I think I'm in it.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I have those moments where I'm obviously elevated,
Mm-hmm.
where, and it's not necessarily in the fight or flight potential moments. That is one avenue.
It is one, yeah.
But those aren't the enlightened path.
Yeah.
When I'm in a place where I'm legitimately adjacent to enlightenment,
Mm.
then I'm not thinking about, am I enlightened?
Mm.
Wait, is this it? Is this the now?
Mm.
Which typically, that's the thought that makes the whole construction fall apart,
Mm-hmm.
is realizing that I'm in it.
Mm.
And in a physics explanation of what that moment is,
Mm-hmm.
Heisenberg's uncertainty principle with subatomic particles.
You can't predict where things go, right?
You don't know where they are until you measure them. But when you measure them, only know where they are or how fast they're going. Because the nature of measuring interacts with the particle, you either dislodge it from its previous path or you slow it down by the interaction of measuring.
Yeah. I remember that. I remember that. The Heisenberg, what's it called? Uncertainty principle.
Yeah.
It's like I can't predict where this football is gonna go, right? Like that's a part of that.
Yeah, if a football were a quark, yeah.
If I were to throw it, it's like I think it's impossible in quantum physics to actually say like where it's going. Like you can get very close, but
The
it's
tools
not.
we have at our disposal now, we don't.
Yeah.
And the actual action of measuring where that football is interacts because the instruments we use bounce electrons off of subatomic particles, and bouncing electrons off of other particles is like billiards.
Yeah.
When you try to measure where that 8 ball is by hitting it with a cue, you either move it so you know where it was, or you know how fast it's going now because our measuring cue ball stopped.
Yeah. Very interesting, man. There's so much complexity.
And so the way I'm going to roll it back,
Bringing it in.
the way the now collapses for me is when I go, oh, I'm in the now. I'm in the moment right now. Look at me. I'm in the moment.
It's like gone.
It's gone.
I find myself going in and out of it. And I think that if you practice enough, you can bring yourself in and out of it. You know, you might come out of it and go back into it. You know, for me, breath, like
Well, that is what the meditation practitioners or teachers instruct, to follow your breath,
yeah.
And quiet your thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
which is harder than many things I have attempted in my life. because our brains, being the biological machines generating chemical signals that travel from one side of the other to the other.
There's so much going on.
Yes.
It's hard to quiet it.
And there's a level of thought where it seems like it's quiet, right? But the quieter it gets, the more you realize the activity in the neighborhood is going on. I don't know if you've ever been in a quiet room, like a room where the ambient levels are less than 20 decibels. You can hear the blood.
The silence. You can hear the silence, right?
You can hear the blood flowing through your eardrums. And you hear thoughts in your head that you didn't ever know existed. Because there's always been so much background noise out in the world and in your head. And the further down you go, the more of those
things come up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is what makes continuous occupation of the now
Interesting.
very exceedingly difficult. I would refuse to use the word impossible because exceedingly difficult is even harder than that.
Interesting. I think for me, it's a constant practice. It's like something for me personally, in my experience, for me to be in the moment, which is one of my main objectives. I want to try to be present. Whatever that is to me is I want to give you my full attention. I want to give you my best self. I want to be at your service, not just you, but everyone I come across, right? So even when I'm at a show, I don't want to be thinking about the burrito that's in my fridge at home. You know, like, am I gonna heat that up? Or like, I want to be present. I want to be right here with you because I know the benefits of that. So I think for me, it's a constant practice.
But if you get a hunger signal,
If I get a hunger signal,
you're going to think of that burrito.
But I think when I'm like very in the moment and I'm just focusing on this, like all those things kind of like dissipate, bro. Where I'm just like, I'm hyperly focused on what I'm doing. Like I can feel the air on my hands right now, bro. I can like, it's like I feel everything going on. I feel the little bit of back pain I got, whatever, my muscle being sore. But being present for me is a constant practice, and I strive every day to constantly do things to help me be present. You know, and that includes like exercise for me. Like when I exercise in the mornings, Monday through Friday, that just the exercise puts me in that primal animal like presence that we have. Like you were talking about like being on the edge from falling. Like to me, that's like a primal thing. Like your brain is kicking you into the moment.
Oh,
because
absolutely,
it's like I have to be here or I could fucking die, right? So it's like, or if someone brought a gun to your face, you're gonna immediately stop thinking about everything, and you're gonna be like, "Oh shit, how can I survive this?" Right? Which obviously some people have those moments where they have life flashes and you go through everything, right? Like, but ultimately, it's a practice for me. For my relationship with the moment is a constant practice. Reading, meditation, exercise, walking, rapping, singing, writing lyrics, all those things. Like just kind of like when I write, the best writing I do is when I'm not thinking. God, it's like freestyling. Like I'll play a beat. The other day when I was here, right? And I was trying to write, I was thinking too much, you know? But when it's like when I write my best work, my best songs that are like tested to the public that people love, those songs I was present. Play the beat. Okay, yeah, 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 and it's like, write this, da da da, whatever it is, da da da, and it's just like, let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go. Then I'll go back to it later, and I'll think, and then that's when you make things like perfect, right? Like you fix things, like to go, okay, we got the gist out, this flow of consciousness. Now let me help the listener understand it better by swapping this word with this word. But I just said a lot.
Yeah. Bruce Springsteen, the boss.
Yes.
He said, if you start writing your song from an intellectual position, it sucks. I want to argue with that because I'm contrarian by nature. But I don't think he's wrong.
Nothing's impossible. That's a very absolute, but I get what you're saying, right? Like
Right.
You're saying, if you were to play devil's advocate, you could say, well, not everything, but for the most part, he's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I could, really search.
You can nitpick.
And find a case.
Like, but Eminem on this album, on this, yeah.
The problem with that is I don't know that Eminem was coming from an intellectual place when he made that thing that I'm going to use as an example. But I'm just picking up what you're using it.
Yeah.
So I have to agree with him.
Yes.
Because I see the principle he's identifying. Music is, and I was explaining this to one of my children the other day, music is the code. It's the language that tells us how to move our bodies. Mm-hmm. And if you're starting it from an intellectual place, the movements are not going to feel
natural. Yeah.
Not only natural, but conducive to an emotional experience.
There we go. I like that.
Because when we listen to music, even if the words have a high level of intellectual expression, underlying all of it are these waves of communications that are nonverbal. And those are emotions.
Yeah. And that's the thing is logic and emotion, two different things. I would even say logic and emotion have polarity. It's always been like the tale as old as time is like a couple. A man is always trying to rationalize everything while the woman's in a fritz with her emotions. Oh my God! But what, I burnt the toast and now dinner's ruined and this and that, and it's like, no, it's okay, it's nothing. Oh, but this and that. It's like, yeah, but it's no big deal. But and it's like,
while having a small problem with your example and your generalizations, I agree with you on the underlying expression.
Like logic versus emotion, they don't always agree with each other, right? It's like,
and the interplay between the two is an entire branch of art. Mm-hmm. For instance, the themes explored by the original series of Star Trek. Mm-hmm. Spock is logic, and Dr. McCoy is emotion.
I didn't watch Star Trek, but I get you.
And the sparks and conversations and the rivalry within their friendship stems from their representing these two different things.
Duality.
Yes.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And it's just the first example that...
To segue into something new but it's still in the realm of things we're speaking on. So Star Wars. I'm a big Star Wars fan. Not of anything Disney. I'm not a big Disney dude. I'm not up in there watching Rey run around with her little yellow sword or whatever lightsaber. See, I don't even know because I didn't watch it. Okay, and I didn't like the Boba Fett series. But anyway, um, I like the Star Wars universe because there's like light and dark, a duality. There's Darth Vader, then there's Luke Skywalker. Or there's like this polarity that kind of like constantly changes the state of the galaxy. Whoever has more rule. And I think that reflects real life. They say art imitates life or whatever. Or, yeah, I think that's the same.
Conflict is the essential building block of narrative. Man versus nature. Man versus man. Man versus himself. Good versus evil.
Yeah, I like the good versus evil thing. And I think that exists on so many levels, not just Earth or like, Russia versus Ukraine type of thing. It's like even internally we fight like a good and the evil constantly.
The building blocks of narrative are not always the recipe which cooks reality. Because narrative is inherently contains a perspective.
A bias.
Yes. And narratives are something that a narcissist will spin a narrative as presentation in order to ingratiate themselves within you. And this is something we're all deeply attuned to, which is why there's that whole social security risk reward balance that we spoke of earlier. And narratives are a tool for projecting a story that you want your audience. And in a social situation, your audience is that one person you're speaking with or those 10 people you're speaking with.
Yep. Or the millions of people listening to this podcast right now.
Right. And the narrative that we are successful begins in a small moment.
Yep. One thing before I go that I think would be interesting is I think they say being egoless is also an ego. I don't think there's a such thing as someone that doesn't have an ego. I think ego exists amongst all of us, and I think saying you have no ego is also having an ego.
A healthy ego acts as a gate. It is a protector.
Yeah.
It allows those who it deems worthy into the vulnerable parts. And it keeps out those ideas or people who are harmful. Much like we're deeply attuned to detecting a narcissist spinning a narrative upon us, the ego is searching for formidable foes. A healthy one acts as a gate that swings both ways. An unhealthy one is locked in one position or the other, open or closed, striving to stay in the now. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but I think enough books and teaching and philosophy indicates that that's the pathway to maintaining a healthy ego. And maintaining the healthy ego allows us to exist within the framework of society while we're spinning reality.
I also, This is a very cute kitty that you have here. Hello. Um, this is her third appearance. Yeah.
Yes.
It's a he, her
She.
third appearance. Um, yeah. So I think having a healthy ego is important. I think me in my life, I've had a very unhealthy ego before, and we can break down ego into like your identity, who you are, right? Ego is just saying I am this, and believing that, even if it's not true, even if it's not even rooted in reality, bro.
Well, if we use the terms of Freud,
Freud,
um,
what is that?
Dr. Freud,
Okay,
Sigmund Freud, um, what you just spoke of is known as the id,
id.
ID,
Okay,
the id, which,
so like someone's like, have you ever heard someone say, "Yeah, that's just how he is." That's just who he is. He's
yeah,
just an asshole. He's always mean. He's just a fucking asshole. That's who that guy is. And it's like, yeah, that's who he identifies with, right? And that's who he portrays to the world, right? It's not like he's just damned to be an asshole. Like that's who that person
and I
identifies with.
sometimes wonder about, and when you mention that, there are catalogs of people in my head
Yeah.
that,
You see that one asshole.
right, and even still, I think maybe I don't know that person well.
Hmm.
And all they're showing me because they don't want to let the vulnerable parts.
Hmm. Hurt people hurt people. But yeah, ultimately, I think having a healthy ego is a good goal to have. And I think real, like, because um maybe 6 or 7 years ago, that's when I started getting into the spiritual stuff, right? And that's when I adopted this identity that was rooted in love and peace, and you know um I had a more of a moral compass in the present moment and all this hippy dippy stuff. That's when I got it about 7 8 years ago. And I adopted a ego from that at first. For the first couple years, it was like peace and love, man. Like that's the only way, dog. Like there's nothing else. And it's like anything that is absolute is not rooted in reality, man. It's like there's just so much. There's so much more to life than just one way of thinking. And that's why like I can be a peace and love guy, but I also am a guy that often goes to the gun range, right?
Well, it. I admit it is fun to hear something make thunder in your hand
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
to see it strike something 100 yards away.
Yeah.
Um,
It's fun.
there is a pleasureful kick.
For me personally, I grew up like with a country father. My dad was super country dude from Kentucky. And
I can hear it in the
so
way
when
you say the
yeah,
name of the state.
Kentucky. And when I was 5 years old, my dad gave me my first shotgun. I had a shotgun, bro, when I was 5 years old. It was a single. Um, it only held one shotgun shell, single action, 410, breaks in half, and it was meant for like a young person to learn. And he didn't give me the ammo or anything. It wasn't running around with a loaded shotgun. Um, and he would put it away in his room, but he made it clear that this is your gun. And I would, he would teach me gun safety, and he would teach me how to clean it. He would take me to the woods or the gun range, and he would let me shoot it. And as a man, dude, growing up in Jacksonville, I've seen a lot of gun violence very close to me. Um, and I've also seen a lot of people, sons, men, lose their lives or shoot their freaking fingers off, shoot their hands, dude, because they didn't have someone in their life to teach them gun safety, bro. And for me as a man, like I practice shooting weapons like because I love my family, because I love my life. I want to protect myself. I want to protect my family. I want to protect my little cute kitty. I want to protect my soon to be son, and that's it. Like I think me having a firearm is rooted in love, and I think some people's reasoning is the opposite.
And this does not mean that you're incorrect.
Yeah.
Um, in other societies, in other geographic areas, it's going to be a different opinion.
Yeah.
Um, and a different philosophical ideology.
Mm-hmm.
And they will approach the problems that are inherent with this system from a different perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and solve it in a different manner than we do here.
Mm-hmm.
And that does not infer that their way is correct or our way is correct,
Mm-hmm.
or our subway, the way that's not the mainstream way, is incorrect or correct. They're just different.
Mm-hmm.
There's no morality
Mm-hmm.
in how you arrive at this decision to own a firearm or not,
Mm-hmm.
to permit people to own firearms or not.
Mm-hmm.
There's not an inherent morality to that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, no more so than is created by the population, which is asked that question. And the way we arrive at that is not necessarily love or lack of love.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the arrival is the love.
Mm-hmm.
The answer is just the destination.
Mm. Yeah. And all that to say is just how, there's just so much complexity to who we are. And I think just being absolutely one way is extreme typically, right? It's like I take a little bit here, a little bit. I'm with the peace and love, but I'm also with this. And it's like I like rap music, but I also, I eat really healthy foods, or it's like I'm not, just like, you get what I mean. There's just so much.
Now the implication is that people that like rap music only eat junk food.
Well, go to the hood, bro. Go to the corner store, get you an ice dripper, dog. Get you a big old spicy pickle, man.
Now,
Some hot
now,
Cheetos.
now you're encouraging me to have stereotypes.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of duality, man, to each and every one of us, and
I think we are in a multipolar universe, which means that good and evil are just two options out of multiple options.
You don't think that multiple options sit between two polarities?
Not necessarily, no.
You think it's more complex than that?
Yeah.
Interesting. I I would
Nature
yeah.
supports both good and evil.
Yes. Yes. I don't think either is wrong. I think all those infinite options are rooted in one or the other.
Now, our capacity as humans to understand and comprehend all of those different poles may be questionable.
Limited, right? You would say limited.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like we can't really fathom it as much as we'd like to.
I mean, we understand the concept of imaginary numbers, right? But do we use them in our regular day-to-day? Not necessarily. So we operate in real numbers because I can count. Oh, look, there's 88 keys.
Yeah.
But there's tones in between each of those keys that are irrational to try to play with this instrument, but I can tweak some knobs and hit them, and they have a valuable contribution. So the black and white, the good, the evil, the ebony, the ivory. Oh, now I've backed myself into a song lyric corner. Live together in perfect harmony.
Who's that?
That's Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's a dynamic duo right there, man.
Yeah.
Well, Nate, it has been an absolute pleasure, my friend.
Chaso Love in the house, everybody. Welcome to the living room once again.
What episode number is this?
I don't know what this is.
And is this your first time doing this?
This is the first time dialoguing.
Hey, this is an absolute pleasure. Please check this man's other work out. I back this dude from what I know. I met him in a freaking bar with a trumpet in his hand. And the rest is history, man. We here.
Always a pleasure.
Hey,
come back again.
Always. Yes, sir. Thank you very much for having me.
And peace to everyone out there.